Welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast, your home for weekly information and inspiration to help you get the graduate job of your dreams.
Hello and welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast with your host, James Curran. The Graduate Job Podcast is your weekly home for all things related to helping you on your journey to finding that amazing job. Each episode I bring together the best minds in the industry, speaking to leading authors, entrepreneurs, coaches and bloggers who bring decades of experience into a bite-sized weekly 30-minute show. Put simply, this is the show I wish I had when I graduated. And a big hello to you from a sunny London for the 71st edition of the Graduate Job Podcast, the UK's #1 careers podcast. Now, thanks to everyone who's been in touch since last week's episode with Corinne Grant and Tristan Hooley. Don't forget, you still have time to enter the prize draw to win a copy of their excellent book. So simply email me at hello@graduatejobpodcast.com to be entered into the draw. And also a big congratulations to listener Yu Ching from Canada. Now, sharp-eared listeners might remember that Yu Ching got in touch last year as she was looking to apply to work in the UK from Canada and was looking for advice on the best way to do it. Now, that was the inspiration for episode 62 on how to apply for a graduate job in a different country. And I'm pleased to say that Yu Ching followed that advice and has bagged herself her dream job here in London, so well done to Yu Ching. So if you have any queries or job search questions, do drop me a line as well at hello@graduatejobpodcast.com and I'll see what I can do and maybe create some episodes about them as well. So, moving on to the episode in hand, and boy, do I have a treat for you today. Coming on the show for the second time, a true careers expert who you will have seen on the news, in the papers, on the bookshelves, and back on the show. Yes, it's Corinne Mills, author of many brilliant careers books, including her new book, Career Coach, How to Plan Your Career and Land the Perfect Job. In this episode, we delve into Corinne's new book, exploring some of my favourite chapters, which I know will help you as you search for a graduate job. Amongst other things, we cover top career blockers that might be holding you back and how to overcome them, such as concerns about not having the right skills or qualifications, or not having confidence, or worries about standing out. We discuss about making tough decisions in your graduate job search because at some point you're going to have to. And we also cover the best ways to research companies. We delve into the topic and importance of values, and we also touch upon how drawing a picture of your world can help you to find a graduate job. Yep. You heard me right on that one. Now, it's a wide-ranging interview, and we cover a lot of different topics, and I know you're going to enjoy it just as much as I did. As always, all links to everything we discuss and a full transcript can be found in the show notes at graduatejobpodcast.com/careercoach. From there, you'll also find links to all of the other 70 episodes which cover every aspect of getting a graduate job, from help with interviews, assessment centres, to specific companies, to finding a job you love. Check them out and you won't go far wrong. Now, one question that did come up over the last 2 weeks was from Tom, who asked for the best way to subscribe to the show. Well, Tom, check out graduatejobpodcast.com/subscribe, which has links to how to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and by email. So something for everyone there. Now, just before we get to Corinne, let's have a little message from today's sponsor, who are our friends over at careergym.com. CareerGym is the #1 place for you to undertake all of your psychometric tests which you're going to face when you apply for a graduate job. Now, no matter what graduate job you apply for, you're going to have to do some type of verbal reasoning, situational judgment, working style tests, and you can practice all of these at careergym.com, as well as numerical and abstract reasoning tests. They are all produced by testing experts and exactly the same as the ones you're going to see in the real graduate job tests. Now, you can just practice them as you want, or you can do them in exam mode under time pressure, and they all come with detailed explanations and solutions, and you can track your progress and see how you compare against your peers. Now, it's never too early to start revising for psychometric tests, so don't put it off, as you might not get much notice before the test, so you want to make sure that you are ready to go. If you're applying for a graduate job, you're going to have to do them, so pull your finger out now and start revising straight away to make sure you don't fall at this very first hurdle. I've been recommending the site for years to the clients I coach, and it comes very highly recommended. And what's even better is if you use the code GJP, you're going to get 20% off all of their tests. You can't say fairer than that. So head on over to careergym.com, That's careergym.com, and use the code GJP to get 20% off and start practicing today. Now on with the show. I'm very pleased to welcome back to the show a lady who needs no introduction. You might have seen her on TV, on Sky News, the BBC or CNN, or read her in The Guardian or Daily Telegraph, or one of her best-selling books such as You're Hired, How to Write a Brilliant CV, or Career Coach, How to Plan Your Career and Land Your Perfect Job. And of course, you will have heard her in episode 24 of the Graduate Job podcast on how to sell yourself effectively. Corinne Mills, welcome back to the show.
Hello, James. What a fantastic introduction. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. And Corinne, it's amazing. Just over 2 years since you were on the show for the first time. So how have you been over that time?
Yeah, very good. Very good. It's kind of been an interesting 2 years all round for everyone, I think. But I'm really pleased to have kind of developed this new book, the new Career Coach book. That's taken an awful lot of my time, but in the meantime, also been seeing lots of coaching clients, and everyone's got an interesting story, an interesting challenge, and a lot of success. So it's been a very positive 2 years, even if politically there's been a lot of uncertainty around.
It certainly has. And today we're going to discuss the latest edition of your excellent book, Career Coach, How to Plan Your Career and Land Your Perfect Job. It's been time well invested. It really is a brilliant book. So, starting at the beginning, Corinne, in one of the early chapters of the book, you describe an exercise which I really liked, as I'm quite a visual person, which was drawing a picture of the world. Could you run us through what this is and why it could be useful for graduates looking for their first graduate job?
Yes, now I've included this activity, and sometimes I do it on a workshop, sometimes I'm doing it when I'm coaching people kind of one-to-one, and I get people to draw a picture of their world, of their career, as they see it now. And people look at me kind of gone mad and think, what on earth is she asking me to do this for? But I say, look, you can put anything down there at all. You can put people, places, you can put how you're feeling down there, you can put metaphors. Really, it's a very blank canvas to put anything down on there that feels important to you. It's not about drawing by any means. I mean, I can't draw. I can do stick people and, and squiggles. But what's quite profound about what comes out as a result is that you see very much a psychological snapshot of where people are at the moment, because what gets expressed in people's pictures most often is their feelings of frustration, uncertainty. It might reveal that actually there are some things they're really happy with and they really enjoy and want to do more of, but there's other things that are really worrying them. And quite often the things that are worrying them seem disproportionately large on their photo. So it's actually a very revealing picture. And what's useful about that in career coaching, or when you're thinking about your coaching, is that you can see what's taking your mental energy at the moment, as well as sometimes the things that you can do to to remedy that. So as a kind of a stock take, you can talk practically about, well, this is my career situation at the moment and I'm working on this, or I'm struggling to get this job, or whatever. But it's also very useful to know just how you're feeling, how confident you're feeling, as well. That's an important part that you need to take into consideration.
Yeah, no, and what would go into the picture? Is it just anything that people are feeling at the time in terms of just getting it down?
So people might put their place of work, they might put their boss, they might put the commute to work, they might put metaphors, they might put a staircase with a glass ceiling. They might, if they want to work outdoors, they're fed up working indoors, they might put the open countryside because that's the thing that really attracts them. Whereas, they represent feeling very cramped in the office that they're with, or they might represent conflict. They might have people fighting with each other, or a lack of money. Any of those things. It's really, really diverse. And sometimes people are just just draw squiggles. You can't see actually what it means at all. But the meaning behind that, when they talk to you about the meaning of what they've represented on there, it's really heartfelt. It's really deeply rooted. And I think as a career coach, what you're doing, and when people are thinking about the career, you're looking at the practical situation, but there's also something about helping people getting in the right psychological frame of mind to make the move, to put themselves forward, to, bring their best A game to an interview. So I think just taking stock at the moment and seeing where people are, where people's confidence levels are, for instance, that's always really helpful.
And I've used these type of exercises in workshops I've run before, and despite often people might be quite skeptical about doing them at the beginning, but then once they've overcome their skepticism and got involved, then they really do find the benefit from them. So with this example, would you recommend that people do it and then maybe come back to it a couple of days later to try and analyze it, or get someone else to analyze it, or analyze it themselves? What would you recommend?
I think just kind of being really in the moment and spontaneously doing it is really important. But as you say, then give yourself some space to go back to it. One, because you might want to add something, but two, because it's often quite profound. I mean, I've used that word a few times, profound, but that's not an understatement. People can be really very struck by what they see represented down there. So I think giving it some space, then going back to it and seeing the raw emotion that you often can see in the picture. But I also think it is helpful talking to somebody else about it, and just that, because I think the thing about the picture is that sometimes it's hard to articulate what you're feeling and to find the words to express what's kind of churning around on your head. And drawing a picture is a very shortcut way to access that. And once you've got the picture down, you can then start to describe the picture and why you've done it that way. So it helps in the articulating, if you like, of how you're feeling. So I think if you've got an opportunity to talk to somebody else, so that might be a friend, a partner, a career coach, just to unleash that a little bit. Because as I say, it's a very psychologically rooted exercise, actually. So I think to relieve some of that psychological pressure that might have built up, particularly if you're in a challenging career situation, the picture is a way to open the gate. Talking about it to somebody else is a way to kind of, again, help vent it. And in venting it, it kind of dissipates some of its energy. Yep. And it's more manageable.
And so I really like them. But for people who might be, as I mentioned, feeling a bit skeptical about doing this, what recommendations would you give to why they should really, give it a go, put their skepticism to the side for half an hour and just really get stuck in?
Well, I think that nobody's forced to do the exercise, and some people are less visual than others, and again, sometimes people might be dyspraxic or they're worried about, so I understand all of those concerns. But I think if they can give it a try, just go with it. They don't need to show anybody else to it. It's the purpose and meaning is for them. But I think if they give themselves to it, I think they will find something that's meaningful about it. But there's no point doing it half-hearted. Yep. Just doing a mini doodle and right, I've done the exercise. Because actually, with all of the exercise, whether you're working with a career coach, whether you're working through this book, Career Coach, it's like there's only any point if you're going to give it your all. Yep. If you're going to really try, there's no point doing this superficial. So I'd say, look, just go for it. Just try it properly and see what comes out.
And we've talked about the book, and links to the book and a full transcript will be available in the show notes, which are today at graduatejobpodcast.com/careercoach. So, Corinne, moving on to chapter 4 in the book, where you talk about values, and you have a values questionnaire in there. As a new graduate starting out, why do you think it's important for people to really spend a bit of time thinking about what their values are?
Because there's so many permutations of places you could go and different roles you could do and different organizational cultures that it's, pretty mind-boggling. And I think actually, if you've got a clear sense of what's important to you, and finding an organization that's more likely to align to that, you're probably going to be more successful. You're probably going to be more engaged in the job. You're probably going to do better. And I think quite often, when you're a graduate, you're kind of first, second job. You do the first job you go to is probably not going to be the last job you ever have. You kind of learn as you go along. But I think that if you've kind of worked for an organisation that's compatible with the things that are important to you, and then you can build on that, I just think you're much more likely to have a more satisfying career experience.
Yep, no, I completely agree. And it is something in my experience that people do tend to overlook, because if you don't think about your values and what's going to drive you and make you happy at the beginning of your career, it then does sometimes cause trouble further down the line, and it's easier to do it at the beginning than it is when you get to 30 or 40 and find you're in a job that you're not particularly happy with.
Yeah, and I think, because I talk to a lot of graduates who feel that there's a mismatch with, and also the other thing I'd say is that your values, particularly at this age stage, sometimes the values that you have are also ones that you've kind of imbibed through family, through your peers. You're still evolving or still thinking about your own set of values. So it might be, particularly, there's a value about, it's really important to go to university. You've got to have this kind of career. You've got to have a professional path. And these are things that you've inherited as you've kind of grown up. But actually, kind of going into the world of work, they're not always expressive of who you really are. Actually, maybe it was really important, that you kind of did an engineering degree, or you did accountancy or management consultancy, or worked for, international development as a degree earlier in your career, because it felt like those were values that, the kind of career that you wanted. But actually, sometimes the experience of working in those kind of roles doesn't quite match who you are. Maybe you want to work in something that's more commercial, or something that's more charitable, or something where it's more collaborative or teamwork orientated than hierarchical. But actually, I think the book is trying to ask those questions to help you really think through for yourself. Well, my identity is evolving. Those things might have been important for me in the past, but what is true for me going forward at this point of time? What are my key priorities? And that can definitely help in kind of your targeting of the right kind of roles and organisations for you to work for.
Yeah. So speaking about those organisations, then, once you've thought about the list, and there's a brilliant list in the book of all the different types of values, how as a new graduate can you then begin to link them to a job which you've probably never done? So you're not sure whether those values are actually going to be in the job that you're applying for. How can they begin to sort of maybe put those two things together?
I think what the book does is raise awareness of what you want, but also what to look for in an organisation. So I think it enables you to ask the right questions or look for the right things. So for instance, you can often tell more about an organisation's culture by just looking at their website. So the words that, yes, there's marketing spiel that's going on, but the way in which they describe themselves, the organisation's self-perception, will give you some clues. Does it want to be, an innovator? Is it big on corporate social responsibility? Is there something about being a meritocracy? You can, just in the way that it describes kind of careers, just that you can pick up those clues. The other thing I often say as well is kind of look at Glassdoor.com, where you can find a bit more about the culture, so you can look a little bit more behind the scenes. Also talk to people who work there or who've supplied to it, so you get a bit of an inside track. But I think the important thing is that once you it's a bit like once you alert to the clues, you can't stop seeing them.
Yeah.
But actually,
no,
you don't know they're there. You just kind of take everything at face value.
Yeah, I always encourage the clients I coach to make a really big effort to try and speak to people at the company where they're applying to, just to get that more honest view, and it helps them get the more honest view, but it also plays a big part in impressing through the different application stages to show that they've put the effort in to actually speak to these people. But now Glassdoor's another good website as well. Maybe just disregard the really positive and disregard the super negative people who might have an axe to grind, and the people in the middle probably give you a fair impression of what the corporate culture's like there.
And I think it's also very powerful if you're at an interview and the employer is saying, well, why did you want to apply to us? And you can genuinely say, well, actually, I've looked at your organisation. I've looked at the values, the way that you operate. I like the way that you do this. I like the way that, it's very team orientated. I like working in a team. That comes across really well because you're right. One, you've done your research. Two, you're kind of realistic. But three, you're showing that you've actively made a decision to apply to this particular company because you feel it's a good match. And employers will really like that.
That's a brilliant idea, and I know when I've been on the other side of the interviewing fence, I can count on one hand the number of times people have gone to that level of thinking about the role that they're applying for, and it just does. It really impresses you. It just puts them in really good light. Moving on then, Corinne. Another one of my favourite chapters was chapter 17 on making decisions. Because at some point, listeners, you're going to be faced with making some tough job search decisions, as job offers tend to be like buses in that you'll get nothing and then they'll suddenly all come along at once. Corinne, could you maybe talk us through some of the tips that you have for effective decision making in the job process?
So I think that you need some decision criteria to help you make decisions. I think quite often people go on gut instinct, or quite frankly, because that's the only job that's available.
Yeah.
Shoehorn them, right? Easy decision, right? That's the only thing on the table. Let's take it. So I think, again, ahead of time, and I think this is what the book is trying to help you do, is to really get all your ducks in a row. So you've got that decision criteria start off, and that will be, yes, it'll be your values, but it'll also be the skills that you want to use. It'll be, it'll be some practical things, right? How much money do you need? Right, we know there's no upper limit, but it's also, you need to get paid. It might be about commute. It might be about other pragmatic things. It might be about work-life balance, or, that it fits well with your, hobby of doing something else in the evening. It might be about getting some funding towards doing some vocational training. It might be about, support for a professional career path. Like, whatever is important for you, you need to have thought those things through in advance. So you've got a bit like a 10-point decision criteria list. Mm-hmm. And then you're comparing the offers that you've got against those. Now, it might be that you can't get a tick on all 10 of those things. You might need to compromise on a few, but I think if you've got a sense of what's important for you, then that decision is going to be easier. And you can do pros and cons lists. I mean, I would say, particularly at the earlier stages of your career, that it's better to be in a role than not. Mm-hmm. So I think if the choice is between, even if it's not a perfect role, if the choice is to do something for now while you look for something else, I think that's probably quite a good move. because it can help kind of give you leverage for your next role once you've got some experience. And no job experience or career experience is ever wasted. You'll always be able to use it at some point of your career and refer back to that experience that you did. So have some clear decision criteria. You may need to compromise, but I think if you're certainly choosing between options, then that will help guide you as to which one to take.
No, that's a great point. And as you said, doing something is always better than doing nothing. But yeah, as you said, having that goal in mind at the beginning, which is why you need to, at the very beginning, think about your values and think about what the ultimate goal is, just so that then later down the line you've got something to refer to, so you'll know if you're headed in the right path and you're headed where you really want to be going.
I think the other thing that does, that decision criteria, is it opens up other possibilities, because quite often people might think, oh well, I want to go into investment banking or management consultancy, or I want to work in for a charity sector, and they can be quite rigid about job titles or kinds of organisations. Whereas if you've got some kind of decision criteria, and perhaps if we look at the charitable front, you want to do something that helps benefit society, well, actually, there's lots of different routes to do that. So that could be, yes, it could be charity, but it could be governmental, it could be part of a corporate social responsibility, you could go into clinical NHS type work. That decision criteria can open up way more possibilities than if you were much more narrow on job titles.
Definitely, no, I completely agree there. That's a really good point. So the next chapter in the book, again, is one of my favourites. I've got quite a few favourites today. But as it looked at common career blockers that people might have, and I know that, to be honest, I've faced most of these at some point as I've been looking for work. Yeah. So if we maybe look at some of the common ones that listeners probably might be feeling as well as they look for a graduate job. So number one, I'm worried that if I try, I will fail and look stupid. What would be your recommendations here?
Yeah, I think most people feel like that, don't they? They're worried about failing. The thing is, what's the upshot of failing? What's the worst case scenario if you fail? Well, all right, so you don't get the job, right? Well, then just apply for something else. Actually, the worst case scenario for failing is really not at all catastrophic. If something, you take a job, it doesn't work out, you find yourself another job. The problem is that if you get so worried about the failure bit, you don't try. And that's the worst thing. And I come across an awful lot of people who are stuck in miserable situations because they might try, but they try half-heartedly to get themselves out of that situation. Mm-hmm. So I think in some respects you have to be prepared for failure, right? You're not going to get every job you ever apply for, right? It's not going to happen. But the more wholeheartedly you go after something, the more effort you put in, the more likely you are to succeed.
No, I completely agree. And you see this with people's graduate job applications where instead of putting the time in and, putting the effort in and focusing on 5 companies, for example, they'll do a scattergun approach and apply to 20 and then wonder why they get rejected from 20. And as we talked about at the very beginning with the exercise, with, drawing down where they currently feel they are, unless you're going to do it properly and put your 100% in, there's no point doing it really.
It is, and look, nobody likes being rejected. It's horrible. But it is a job market. It is competition. I think you have to accept that rejection probably goes with the territory. But that's not a reflection of you and your capabilities. That's not saying you are rubbish. What it's saying is it's either it wasn't the right job for you, you didn't do a good enough application, or you perhaps need to try some other strategies to get into a way. So you need to kind of creatively problem solve that. But don't think it's just, it's not because you're rubbish. It's just that you need some other tactics.
Yep. Next blocker then. It's such a competitive graduate job market, there's no way I'm going to stand out.
I think, well, yes, it is competitive. It's always competitive. You you can stand out, and actually there are I think, some fairly common sense practical things you can do, which just by themselves will help you stand out. Because, for instance, a lot of candidates, and this is not just grads, these are more mature candidates as well, will apply for jobs not knowing what those jobs really entail. They're not a good fit.
Yep.
So either they don't fit the selection criteria, they haven't quite grasped what's required, and they've sent out almost a generic CV or application. So quite frankly, that's going to get rid of perhaps 90% of the candidates who fall into that sphere. So to be in the top 10% who get more consideration, right, make sure that it is the right job for you. You can properly fit the selection criteria, and you've done your research. I think the other thing is simple things like diligence in the way that you fill in your application or CV. I mean, we've done a couple of times at Personal Career Management. We've done CV surveys, and we've just judged kind of hundreds and hundreds of CVs, and we've said, look, on their own terms, would they be likely to be considered for shortlisting? And 9 out of 10 had spelling errors, or they had kind of errors in the way the kind of format or the language wasn't well expressed. That's 9 out of 10. So you think you only have to do a few things right to already be ahead of the crowd and to stand more chance.
Yeah, it's I speak to quite a few graduate recruiters about their graduate schemes on the podcast, and speaking, offline to them when we're not recording, just asking them about where people fall out of the process, and you get ones where they say, we get 12,000 people apply for maybe 50 places, and you tell people that and they think, oh bloody hell, that's so many people, there's no chance of me getting it. But then when you speak to the actual recruiters, they say, we get 12,000 applications, but 3,000 people won't give us all the information they need on the actual online application form. So straight away, 3,000 people have gone.
Yeah.
And then, as you mentioned, another maybe 5,000 people have spelling mistakes in the application. So straight away, they're gone as well. So immediately you're down to, 6,000 people. And then maybe half the people will fail the online tests because they've not put the work in. So, if you do a bit of work and the numerical tests, available reasoning tests, then suddenly you're down to, 3,000 people. So it's very quickly people get whittled away who've put no effort in and can't be bothered. So if you can, as you said, put that effort in at the beginning, then straight away you'll just be in the top 10% of applications. So, you've suddenly gone from 50 out of 12,000 to 50 out of 1,000, which is a lot more manageable.
And I think I absolutely right. And I think the more kind of, you get brownie points for this, and things like doing a covering letter. So quite often when you do applications, sometimes you upload your CV for a job. It might say covering letter optional. But actually, if you do a really nice covering letter, something over and above, here's my application, but why it is that you want the job, you get brownie points. It can tip things in your favour. Anything you can do that's going to get you an extra brownie point. So that might be, I know sometimes with digital recruitment, it's hard to talk to a human being, but if there's somebody you can talk to, if there's a dialogue you can have on Twitter with somebody or on their Facebook page, so you've just got some dialogue that's going and some name recognition, I think that helps. I also think that sometimes, if the front door is really jam-packed with people trying to get in, as it is for many graduate schemes, then try and find a different door. You know, the lots of people get jobs without graduate schemes. See if you can get another way in. Perhaps there are some other more junior jobs in that organisation. Go do that for a year. And then when the graduate applications come around, oh, I'm already working in this organisation. I'd really like to be considered for the grad scheme. Find other routes in.
No, that's excellent advice. And moving on to another blocker then. I would love to, but I don't have the confidence.
Yeah, I think confidence is a really key thing because you are having to sell yourself to complete strangers who don't know you, and I think that is hard if you haven't got much confidence. But I think you don't have to be the most confident person in the world to get a good job or to have a successful career. And in fact, I know many high achievers who actually, I'd say, have got poor self-confidence, but actually they almost kind of overcompensate, if you like, because they think they're rubbish. They feel like they have to try harder than anyone else, but actually it's made them very, very successful in their career. I think what you have to have, though, is you have to have self-belief that you can do a good job for this particular job. So you don't have to go into not everyone in the world can be a confident extrovert, but I think if you go into an interview, you have to have a self-belief that you can do a good job in that role, and you have to be able to say why you think you can do a good job. And it doesn't matter if you say that and you're a bit nervous in the way that you say it. You still have to say it, and you have to believe it. And I think they're more likely to take that at your estimation. But if you don't have that belief, why should they believe you? They don't know you from Adam. You come in, you look kind of good on paper. They're making summary judgments about you. But if you don't believe in yourself, then they're not going to necessarily take a risk on you. So do think it is, for people who do feel nervous, who haven't got confidence, it's definitely worth working with a career coach to help them find the words, to help them find the tone that's going to help convince, because you're going to need that.
Yep, and as your quote from Henry Ford says in the book, if you think you can, you think you can't, you're right.
Absolutely. And look, we know, there are a lot of people who've got self-esteem issues. It's not just about kind of jobs, it's about perhaps other aspects of their lives. And I think if you are somebody who's had challenges around that, then I think some support, whether it's, counselling or therapeutic support or self-help groups or meditation, mindful, anything that can help you be present and able to kind of help build your confidence in what are very stressful situations. I get that in terms of interviews. Anything you can do along those lines that are going to help you be in that better place, I'd start doing that proactively now, because you absolutely will need it when it comes to your job searching.
Yep, no, I completely agree. Unfortunately, Corinne, time is running away with us. Maybe just one more blocker before we move on to our weekly staple questions. Final one then. I know what I want to do, but I don't have the skills, qualifications, or others I need to compete in this area.
So the great thing is you've got a focus. So you're going to need to plug that shortfall. So it might be that it's not a role you can step into straight away, but actually you can inch your way towards it. So if you know what your target is, find something that will take you in that right direction. And it might be a couple of moves, it might be 4 or 5 different moves until you get to where it is that you want to go to. And you have to be prepared to do study, you might have to be prepared to do some unpaid work experience or extra reading. But I think it's also worth looking at things like LinkedIn to see, people who are in the kind of roles that you're interested in. and what their career path has been, because it's not always, you'll see very often they're not conventional career paths to get there, and it's quite interesting to see how other people have evolved their journey. And think of your career as an evolution, you know, who you are, what the job market wants, they're all changing, they're all evolving. And yes, you need to be focused about where you're getting to, but it kind of evolves, and it might need a few different moves and lots of different activity in order to make that happen. But it kind of never stops still. You're always evolving.
Yeah, and I think the word career comes from the French word carrière, which means path. So if you see it as a path, which is sometimes a winding path, then that will help you as you come to those forks in the road, and you end up maybe going in directions where you didn't necessarily think you might be going originally. But
yeah,
it doesn't.
And I do think that's really the whole thing about career paths. I do think it is becoming very different. I think, you know, talking about the winding road, I think it's much more likely zigzaggy type roads going forward. So I think it's much more likely in the future that people will have to do more lateral moves. You know, they might go up, they might do secondments, they might spend some time kind of self-employed or gig economy. There's lots of different routes that people can take. So I think if people think of hierarchical career paths now, that's an outdated model. What that gives you, though, is much more kind of agency to create the career that's right for you. But you're going to have to be proactive. You're probably going to have to work with several different organisations rather than waiting for your organisation to promote you from within. I think that becomes less likely. But it does mean, in terms of your thinking about kind of taking risks, moving much more frequently, taking much more control of your career, that's definitely the way to go forward, and that's the way to be successful for the future.
Yeah, and as we said earlier, as long as you're doing something, then you'll be moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
Corinne, that is a lovely point for us to finish the main body of the interview on. So let's move on to our weekly staple questions. I've got your previous answers in front of me, so I'm looking forward to seeing what different ones you're going to give us this time. So maybe starting with the first question, what one book would you recommend our listeners should read?
I think, kind of bearing in mind this thing about kind of, you know, you need to do something. It's all very well sitting and reflecting, but you have to kind of take action and be your own agent, really. I think the book by Hermina Ibarra on working identity, I don't agree with everything, but I think her sense of how people evolve their careers and how they experiment, and the idea that there are lots of possible selves. So there are lots of possible kind of career routes that you could go, and potential routes. I think that's really helpful, and her kind of encouragement to just go out and try stuff and see if it fits, I think is very helpful.
Oh, brilliant. That's a new book for me, and one I will definitely add to the reading list. But Corinne is far too modest to recommend her book. So I'll do it for her. Listeners, definitely check out Career Coach, How to Plan Your Career and Land Your Perfect Job, which will be heavily linked to in the show notes over at graduatejobpodcast.com/careercoach. And next question, Corinne, what one website would you recommend that our listeners should check out?
I do think the Guardian Career site is very good. Lots of really good articles, lots of kind of live Q&A, very interactive. I think there's a lot of really good information and material on there.
And of course, you have if you check out that website, you'll see Corinne has often got articles on there, haven't you, Corinne?
Yeah, I do, but myself as well as others. But I think it's a very high quality resource.
Yep, no, I completely agree. And final question, Corinne, what one tip would you give listeners that they can implement today to help them on their job search?
Do something. Take action. Don't sit there. Send off an application. Get your CV sorted. kind of paralysis, and sometimes when you are feeling stuck in your career, you can, it can be difficult to take action, but I think you just need to start somewhere and talk to people. So this is 2 tips. And talk to people. If you're feeling stuck, other people can be such a fantastic help and resource for you of ideas, suggestions, links, networks, all of those things. So do something and talk to somebody.
Brilliant advice and a lovely point for us to finish the interview on. Corinne, it's been an absolute pleasure having you back on the show. What's the best way that people can get in touch with you and the work that you do?
So my website, www.personalcareermanagement.com. I'm also on Twitter at Corinne Mills. That's Corinne Mills. No, I'd be delighted to hear from people.
Corinne, thank you for appearing on the Graduate Job Podcast again.
Pleasure, James. Speak to you soon.
There you go. Many thanks to Corinne. She's a true professional and it's always excellent to have her on the show. I hope you enjoyed the show and took a lot from it. For a deeper dive, make sure you do check out Corinne's book, as you certainly won't be disappointed. Buy a copy through the links to Amazon in the show notes over at graduatejobpodcast.com/careercoach and help support the show, as Amazon pay a minute commission to me if you do so, and it doesn't cost you anything, but it does help to keep the lights on here with the show. As well as buying the book, I do recommend that you try the drawing exercises that we mentioned earlier. If you do try it, send a copy across to me and we can talk it through. Don't forget as well to head on over to graduatejobpodcast.com/subscribe and sign up so that you don't miss a thing. I mentioned last week that I'm developing a course on how to get a graduate job, which will distill down all my years of coaching into one place. So subscribe to make sure you don't miss the launch details for that. If you have any questions, need some help and coaching or help with an application, then do drop me a line. Again at hello@graduatejobpodcast.com. I read everything and do look forward to hearing from you. So that is just about everything. Do join me next time when I speak with Jason Sweat as we discuss how to get a graduate job in coding. It's a cracker. All that remains to say is I hope you enjoyed the episode today, but more importantly, I hope you use it and apply it. See you next week.